He stands in the corridor of St. Augustine Specialist Hospital in Lagos, shoulders slumped, hands buried deep in the pockets of a suit that probably costs more than most people's cars, yet feels completely useless tonight. His name is Chief Desmond Olanrewaju, a billionaire whose name opens doors, moves markets and terrifies competitors, but inside this cold, over-air-conditioned building, all his power shrinks to nothing. On the other side of the glass, his 8-year-old daughter, Zara, lies motionless, small chest rising and falling with the help of machines that beep and blink like tiny, impatient clocks. He watches her the way a drowning man watches the surface of the water, hoping it will break for him. Every time her eyelids tremble, he leans forward, whispering her name, Zara, baby. Daddy is here. But her eyes never open. The doctors call it a coma, a deep sleep caused by the accident that flipped their SUV on 3rd Mainland Bridge weeks ago. He calls it a silent punishment, a long corridor of guilt with no visible end. People say time heals, but in that hallway, time does not heal, it repeats. Morning nurses become night nurses, visiting pastors come and go, relatives bring food he barely tastes. He signs checks, approves surgeries, orders second and third opinions from abroad, but nothing seems to change. The machines keep talking, his little girl keeps sleeping. It is okay to feel angry at life sometimes, and he does. He feels angry, helpless, and more alone than he has ever felt in boardrooms filled with suits. His wife, Amaka, spends most nights at home with their teenage son, Toby, trying to pretend that online classes and homework still matter. She calls him often, her voice trembling with weariness. Desmond, you should come home and rest, she says. He shakes his head even though she cannot see him. How can he rest when Zara is here, trapped between worlds? So he sleeps in hospital chairs, drinks too much coffee and prays with pastors even though his faith feels like a broken radio, catching no clear station. He remembers the old days when his mother would tease him for working too hard. One day, she would say, "You will learn that money does not hug you back." Back then he would laugh, shrug, and keep typing emails. Now, standing outside the intensive care unit, he feels every word of that warning. Money can buy machines, consultants, private wards, and imported medicines, but it cannot buy the one thing he would give everything for, Zara's laughter echoing again through their Ikoyi mansion. Outside the hospital walls, Lagos continues its restless rhythm. Danfo buses honk aggressively, hawkers chase cars with bottled water and gala, generators hum like tired bees. Somewhere under the Falomo Bridge, a small boy with dusty slippers and a battered flute plays for coins, his music floating into the night air like a prayer nobody asked for but somebody desperately needs. Desmond does not know this boy yet, has never seen his face, has never heard that flute. For now, they are strangers walking in the same wounded city, carrying different storms in their chests. But life has a way of weaving strangers together when healing is on the line. The hospital always changed after midnight. The bright, busy halls dimmed into long rivers of silence. Nurses moved like soft shadows, doctors whispered, and even the air felt thicker, as if holding its breath with the patients. That night was no different, except that something unusual stirred at the entrance, something small, quiet, and unexpected. A boy no older than 12 slipped through the revolving doors unnoticed at first, hugging an old wooden flute to his chest like a lifeline. His name was Kamsi, though nobody in the hospital knew that yet. His clothes were rumpled, his slippers torn, and his hair had that unbrushed, wind-blown look of someone who slept in open places, under bridges, beside shops, or anywhere the night allowed. His eyes, however, held something sharp, something determined. He walked as if pulled by an invisible string, moving quickly but carefully, dodging orderlies and families waiting in anxiety-soaked chairs. One security guard spotted him and frowned. "Hey! You! Come here." But Kamsi didn't stop. He slipped behind a cleaning cart, heart pounding in his chest, the way it did whenever he played for coins near traffic lights and LASMA officials began chasing street kids away. Lagos wasn't kind to children like him. Lagos believed hunger made them thieves. But tonight he wasn't here for food or coins or shelter. He was here because of a melody he hadn't played in months, not since he buried his little sister with nothing but his tears and a promise he whispered into the ground. He moved deeper into the hospital, weaving between chairs and wheelchairs, guided only by a feeling he couldn't explain. It was almost like following the echo of a memory. Somewhere ahead, the corridors thinned into quieter spaces used for patients that needed round-the-clock monitoring. Kamsi paused at one doorway, then another, as if listening for a heartbeat only he could hear. Kamsi panicked. But instead of running out, he darted straight into a room with the door slightly open and froze as he saw the girl lying on the hospital bed. Her small shoulders. Her plaited hair resting across the pillow. Her hands so still they looked carved from wax. Something about her struck him like lightning. Not her face, no, he had never seen her before. It was the feeling she gave off, the same fragile stillness he had seen on his sisters last night. The stillness he hated. The stillness he feared. His throat tightened. His fingers trembled around the flute. He stepped closer before he even knew he had moved. Behind him, 2 nurses entered the room. "Sweetheart, you can't be, what are you doing?" But Kamsi didn't hear them. Or maybe he heard but didn't understand. His mind had tunneled into one memory only, sitting beside his sister, Aurora, during her final hours, playing the lullaby she loved so much, her favorite song, the one she called the Sky Dance. He had promised her he would keep playing it for the world, for anyone hurting, for anyone lost. "Maybe my song will save somebody else," she had whispered in her tiny voice. His breath shook as he lifted the flute to his lips. Everything else fell silent. Even the air seemed to pause. The first note floated out, soft, trembling, but pure. A sound so gentle it felt like a feather falling on water. The nurses froze, not out of fear but out of something they couldn't explain. The melody filled the room slowly, curling around machines and tubes, settling over the sleeping girl like a warm blanket. Then it happened. A tiny twitch. A movement so small it could have been imagined. But it wasn't imagined. Zara's fingers curled, just once, like a flower reacting to sunlight. One nurse gasped, hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God, did you see that?" The other nurse grabbed the chart. "Call the neurologist. Call someone now." But the boy kept playing, unaware that the world behind him had cracked open. The notes deepened, carrying sorrow and hope and memory. As he played, the monitors changed their rhythm slightly, just enough to show life stirring. Doctors rushed in. A resident pressed closer. "Is this real? Check her reflexes." A senior neurologist examined her, stunned. "The girl hasn't moved in weeks." What caused? He froze mid-sentence as the boy played the next line of the melody and Zara's fingers twitched again. It was as if her body recognized something her mind couldn't name. Doctors began shouting instructions. Nurses scrambled. The entire room swelled with disbelief. A miracle was blooming in real time, right there in Lagos, right there in a room nobody would have entered at that moment if the boy hadn't wandered in. Security guards arrived next, panting. "We've been looking for this boy, sir, stop playing. You cannot." But even they stopped when they saw the billionaire's daughter move again, this time her eyelids fluttering gently as though fighting their way back to the world. Kamsi lowered the flute slowly, confused when everyone stared at him like he had just split the Red Sea. "Did I do something wrong?" he whispered. "No," the senior doctor breathed, "you may have just done something none of us could do." At that exact moment, Desmond stormed into the room, frantic after receiving a sudden emergency call. "What happened? Why are there so many people in?" His voice died as he saw his daughter's fingers moving repeatedly, trembling like a message from another world. He fell to his knees instantly, choking on a sound that wasn't quite a sob and wasn't quite a prayer. It was both. It was everything. And then he looked up and saw the homeless boy standing there clutching an old flute, eyes wide with fear and innocence. Life had just shifted. Not slowly. Not gently. All at once. The room stayed frozen for a long moment, everyone suspended between disbelief and wonder, as if the walls themselves were trying to understand what had just happened. Desmond rose slowly from the floor, wiping his face with a trembling hand. His suit jacket felt suddenly too heavy, like it was dragging his entire body downward. His gaze locked onto the boy, the thin, dust-covered child clutching a flute so old it looked carved from yesterday's sorrow. Something inside Desmond shifted, a quiet click of recognition he couldn't name yet, the kind that usually precedes either a blessing or a heartbreak. "Who are you?" he finally asked, voice low, almost fragile. Kamsi lowered his eyes. I didn't mean to cause trouble, sir." His voice carried both fear and a strange kind of gentleness, the tone of a child used to apologizing for simply existing. Desmond stepped forward, still in shock, but trying to gather the pieces of himself. No trouble. Just, tell me why you were playing. How did you know that song would reach her?" Kamsi swallowed hard. His fingers tightened around the flute as if it were the last thing tying him to the world. "I didn't know, sir. I felt like I had to play it. I haven't played it in a long time." A nurse tried to explain the medical impossibility of what they had witnessed, but Desmond barely heard her. His mind was on the boy, on the trembling melody still echoing faintly in the air. Something was hidden behind those small words, something heavy. He could sense it. Years of boardroom battles had sharpened his instinct for truth, and the truth was sitting right in front of him wearing torn slippers. Security approached again, gentler this time. "Olga, make we carry him go talk for reception?" Desmond inhaled deeply, still dazed. "No. Leave him." Then, more softly, "Please," he led the boy out of the ICU and into the waiting lounge that he gestured for Kamsi to sit. The boy perched on the edge of the chair, eyes darting around like a trap. "Hello guys, welcome to my channel where interesting stories of love, communication and empathy are told." As he speaks, he gently invites you to like this video, subscribe, share it with friends, and drop your own perspective in the comments section below, because someone out there may need this reminder that they are not alone. Desmond sat across from him, leaning forward. "What's your name?" "Kamsi, sir." "And how old are you?" 12, maybe 13. "I'm not very sure, sir." That answer hit Desmond harder than he expected. A child unsure of his own age, that was the kind of detail that only happened when life stopped keeping track of you. He spoke gently. "Kamsi, why did you sneak into the hospital tonight? Why that room? Why that song?" The boy stared at his feet. "It's my sister's song." The sentence landed between them like a stone dropped into deep water. Desmond's chest tightened. "Your sister?" Kamsi nodded slowly. "Her name was Adora. She loved this song so much. She used to say it made her dreams dance. When she got sick, I played it for her every night. Even when we didn't have money for medicine, even when she couldn't open her eyes anymore. I still played." His voice cracked, but he pushed through it. "I thought the music would help. I thought maybe the song could reach her where words couldn't." Desmond felt something close to a punch in the stomach. The similarities were too painful, his daughter in a coma, this boy's sister fading into silence. It was a mirror he wasn't prepared to face. "What happened to Adora?" he asked softly. Kamsi's eyes glistened, but he didn't break. "She died, sir. 3 months ago." The words were quiet, but they hit with the weight of a collapsing building. Desmond exhaled slowly, grief swelling in the back of his throat, not just for the boy, but for the echo of his own fear. Losing a child. The one storm he prayed never to meet. The storm this boy had survived without shelter. I'm so sorry," Desmond whispered. Kamsi nodded once, as if he had heard that sentence too many times already. "Before she died, she told me something. She said, if I can't save her, maybe I can save someone else. She made me promise to keep playing the song for people who are hurting. She said maybe God will choose someone else to heal." The simplicity of the statement broke Desmond in places he didn't know still existed. This child, who had lost everything, still wandered Lagos trying to heal strangers with nothing but a wooden flute and a promise whispered beside a grave. He felt a sting behind his eyes again, the kind he kept pushing down all these weeks. "You shouldn't be living on the streets," Desmond murmured, voice thick. "Where are your parents?" "Gone." The boy's answer was immediate, practiced. "It's just me now." A hollow ache spread through Desmond's chest. This boy had walked through storms barefoot, yet somehow carried more light than most adults he knew. He sat back in his chair, quietly absorbing the story. "Do you know what you did tonight?" he asked gently. "My daughter hasn't moved in almost 2 months. Not a twitch. Not even a reflex. But when you played," his voice wavered. "Kamsi, you reached her." The boy blinked. "I didn't do anything big, sir. I just played her the sky dance." The innocence of it made Desmond's vision blur again. He cleared his throat. "You did something none of us could do." A brief silence settled between them, soft and reflective. The kind of silence that lets emotions speak for themselves. For the first time that night, Desmond felt something shift inside him, an understanding that this meeting was no coincidence, no accident, no random crossing of two separate worlds. There was a purpose here, one he didn't fully understand yet, but the feeling was strong enough to make him whisper. "You're not leaving this hospital the way you came in." Kamsi looked up, confused. "Sir?" Desmond shook his head gently, a slow, determined gesture. "Your story isn't ending on the streets. Not anymore." The boy didn't know what that meant yet. But destiny did. And it was already unfolding. The morning after the miracle felt different from every other morning Desmond had lived through since Zara's accident. Lagos was still loud, impatient, overflowing with its usual blend of chaos and color, but inside the hospital, something felt softer, warmer, almost hopeful. It was the kind of morning where the sun rose gently instead of aggressively, where even the traffic outside seemed to honk with a little more restraint. Desmond sat beside Zara's bed, watching her tiny hand that had moved the night before. The doctors insisted it might have been a neurological reaction, a coincidence, a sudden spark that could still fade. But Desmond didn't believe that. Not anymore. Something inside him whispered that this wasn't chance, this was the beginning of something bigger, something sacred. He leaned forward, brushing his daughter's hair with trembling fingers. "Baby. Daddy is here. And you're coming back to us. Slowly, but you're coming back." His voice cracked at the end, and he didn't even try to hide it. Healing wasn't always loud, sometimes it started with a twitch. Sometimes it began with the sound of a homeless boy's flute drifting through a hospital's quiet corridors. Kamsi sat outside in the lounge, waiting anxiously. He had slept on one of the hospital chairs, curled up like a small bird, clutching his flute even in his dreams. A nurse had tried waking him twice, offering him food, but he kept whispering, "Is she okay? Did she move again?" It was touching, the way he cared for a girl he didn't even know. Maybe it was Adora he was really caring for, maybe it was guilt he carried around like a backpack too heavy for his tiny shoulders, or maybe it was simply the goodness of his heart refusing to die despite everything life had thrown at him. Desmond eventually stepped out to meet him, placing a hand carefully on the boy's shoulder. "She's stable," he said softly. "And the doctors want to run some tests today. But she's better than yesterday." He took the boy downstairs to the cafeteria, buying him more food than he could carry. Jollof rice, chicken, bread, even a box of juice. Kamsi stared at the tray as if it were a treasure chest filled with gold. "Sir, this is too much." Desmond shook his head. "Nothing is too much for a child who saved my daughter." Then, lighter, "Besides, eat. You look like the wind can blow you away." Kamsi giggled, a small, shy laugh that made Desmond's heart ache in a way he hadn't felt in years. It reminded him of Toby when he was younger, before life started shifting too fast for anyone to keep up. It reminded him that children everywhere laughed the same, whether in mansions or under bridges. Over the next few weeks, Zara continued showing small signs of progress. A slight eyelid flutter. A shift of her shoulder. A soft sound from her throat that made her mother burst into tears right in the middle of the room. The doctors remained cautious, but Desmond didn't care about caution anymore. He cared about the spark returning to his daughter's body, slowly, delicately, like a shy guest knocking on a locked door. And every time something changed, Kamsi was there, standing quietly near the doorway, hopeful yet afraid to ask if his melody had helped again. Desmond started taking him home sometimes, not permanently, not yet, but for meals, warm baths, and safe sleep. Toby was the first to react. "Dad, who is this?" And Desmond had answered truthfully, though softly, "Someone who helped your sister." They didn't talk much that night. But Toby, awkward teenage boy that he was, left a plate of extra chicken on the table before going upstairs, pretending it was nothing. You know how teenage boys behave when they're trying to be kind without admitting it. It was one of those silent acts of generosity that made Desmond's chest warm. Each time Kamsi returned to the hospital, nurses greeted him with smiles. Some even teased him gently. "Ah, our miracle boy is here again," staring at the floor. "I didn't do a miracle," he would mumble. "It was just a song." But Desmond knew better. The song was more than music. It was memory. It was a love letter to a sister gone too soon. It was grief transformed into an offering for strangers. And that kind of gift rarely went unnoticed by heaven. One afternoon, after a particularly emotional therapy session where Zara's hand squeezed Amaka's fingers for the first time, Desmond and Kamsi sat together outside the hospital on a bench. Cars zoomed by, nurses rushed in and out, and the evening breeze carried that familiar Lego scent, frying puff-puff, exhaust fumes, and hope mixed together. Desmond sighed. "You know, Kamsi, I've spent my whole life believing that money could fix anything. Then life showed me I was wrong." The boy looked up at him, eyes deep and steady. "My sister used to say money is important, but heart is the real healer." Desmond smiled painfully. She was right. Silence stretched between them, gentle and thoughtful. Then Desmond added quietly, "You've suffered too much for your age. No child should walk the world carrying that kind of pain alone." Kamsi shrugged, but his voice quivered. "Sometimes life chooses people to be strong, sir. Even when they don't want to be." Desmond nodded, touched by the wisdom of a boy who had lost everything yet still believed in healing. "Maybe so. But strength grows better in a home than on the streets." Kamsi's brows furrowed. "Sir?" Desmond inhaled deeply, heart pounding. He didn't want to rush the moment, but he also knew the truth. He didn't bring this boy into his life by accident. None of this was an accident. The melody, the miracle, the timing, it all aligned too perfectly to ignore. "Let's take this slowly," Desmond said softly. "But I want you to stay with us more often. Eat with us. Learn with us. Be safe with us." For the first time, Kamsi's eyes filled with tears he couldn't hide. "No one has ever wanted me before, sir." Desmond reached out and squeezed his hand, firm, protective, fatherly. "We want you. And you're not alone anymore. Not today. Not tomorrow." Behind them, somewhere deep in the hospital, Zara's monitor beeped steadily, softly, like a quiet drumbeat of new beginnings. The months that followed unfolded like the slow opening of a long-shut window, letting in sunlight inch by inch. Zara's recovery didn't come in a lightning bolt. It came like dawn, first a glow, then a hint of warmth, then, little by little, full light. Each day, she found something new her body remembered how to do. First it was squeezing her mother's hand. Then her eyelids fluttering open for a second too quick to catch again. Then the faintest smile, the one she used to give whenever her father tried making pancakes and ended up producing something that looked more like burnt frisbees. Through all of this, Kamsi remained a quiet presence in their lives. He still flinched when people raised their voices, still slept curled into himself as if protecting invisible wounds, still looked surprised any time someone saved a meal for him or asked for his opinion. But the Olanruanjus grew used to having him around, and he grew used to the warmth that slowly wrapped around him. On weekends, Desmond invited him over more intentionally. "Pack your things," he'd say, pretending to be stern. "You're staying with us till Monday." And every time, Kamsi hesitated with a small smile tugging at his lips, like a child afraid the invitation might vanish if he blinked too fast. Amaka began buying him clothes, saying things like, "It's just one shirt," or "He needs shoes for church," but even she could hear the softness in her own voice. Toby, meanwhile, pretended not to care, but every evening he asked, "Is he coming tomorrow?" The way older siblings check on younger ones without admitting it. One Sunday afternoon, just as the rains were beginning to fall, the gentle kind that taps on roofs like soft knuckles, Zara finally opened her eyes long enough to meet her father's gaze. Desmond froze, heart slamming against his ribs. "Baby," he whispered. Her lips parted. It wasn't a word, not yet, but it was breath, a step toward speech. Amaka burst into tears, her sobs filling the room like a hymn. A doctor rushed in, then another, then 2 nurses. But in the middle of all the noise, Desmond only saw one thing: his daughter staring at him as if returning from a long, cold journey. In the days that followed, her progress accelerated. She lifted her hand, turned her head slightly, nodded when asked simple questions. Every improvement felt like a miracle, a quiet reminder that life sometimes gives back what it once threatened to take. Not quickly. Not easily. But faithfully. As her strength returned, Desmond made a request one afternoon. "Play for her," he told Kamsi gently. Just like that night. Kamsi hesitated, fear flickering in his voice. "What if it doesn't work again?" Desmond knelt slightly to meet his eyes. "It's not about working. It's about being here. Your music opened a door. We just want to keep it open." So, with trembling fingers, the boy lifted the flute. The moment the first note floated out, Zara's eyes drifted toward the sound, and she smiled, soft, peaceful, like recognizing an old friend. Desmond's heart melted. Amaka covered her mouth to keep from sobbing too loudly. Even one of the nurses wiped a tear discreetly with the edge of her sleeve. It was as if the melody called out to some part of Zara that had been asleep. And she answered. After that day, something subtle shifted in the family's rhythm. It wasn't spoken aloud, but everyone felt it, that thread weaving them together tighter. Desmond saw it every time Kamsi leaned against a kitchen counter chatting with Amaka, or whenever Toby taught him new games, pretending it was no big deal. He saw it between Zara and Kamsi too, how she watched him with trusting, childlike awe, as though sensing the music that had once reached her when nothing else could. One bright Tuesday morning, after another encouraging therapy session, Desmond sat beside Amaka in the hospital garden while Kamsi pushed Zara slowly in her wheelchair. The sun warmed their faces, birds chirped lazily, and even the hospital generators quieted down for once. Amaka glanced at her husband. "He fits here, doesn't he?" Desmond nodded. "He does." She took a slow breath. "Are we ready for what that means?" He didn't answer immediately. Years of grief, guilt, love, and longing settled gently inside him like a book finally closing. "We lost so much in that accident," he said softly. "But maybe God sent someone to help us heal. And maybe we were sent to help him too." Amaka smiled, squeezing his hand. "Then let's not hesitate." That evening, in a softly lit living room that smelled faintly of jollof and vanilla candles, Desmond knelt in front of Kamsi. He took the boy's shaking hands in his own. "Kamsi," he said, voice full, steady, fatherly, "you don't have to walk this world alone anymore." The boy's lips quivered. "Sir, what do you mean?" Desmond swallowed the tightness in his throat. "I mean we want you. Truly. Not as a guest. Not as a temporary visitor. We want you as family." The flute slipped from Kamsi's fingers as he stared at them, stunned. You want me?" Amaka knelt beside them. "More than you know," she whispered, brushing his cheek tenderly. Toby leaned on the staircase, pretending not to cry but wiping suspicious droplets from his face. "Bro, come on. We've already saved you a room. And for the first time in a long, long while, Kamsi sobbed. Not from hunger, not from fear, not from loss, but from the relief of being chosen. From finally belonging. That night, Zara insisted he sit beside her, and she reached out with a shaky hand to touch his arm. It was small, soft, but full of meaning. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Thank you, for finding me." He cried again. And Desmond cried. And Amaka cried. And Toby, in typical teenage fashion, muttered, "All of you are too emotional," while wiping more tears than anyone else. Life didn't magically become perfect, but it became whole. The boy who once played a song to save strangers now had a family who would spend the rest of their lives saving him too. And the billionaire who once walked hospital halls alone now walked them surrounded by a love he never expected. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to get notifications for more stories.